Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. As many of you know, FFF is a nonprofit educational foundation whose mission is to present an uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy. And as part of that case, we have long taken, actually from our beginning, an opposition, fervent opposition against the government's program, the war on drugs and all drug laws in general. And as part of that, we've put together a series of videos in which people present their views as to why the drug war should be ended. And I'm pleased today to have the founder of the Mises Institute, the CEO of the Mises Institute, Lew Rockwell, who has been one of my real life, longtime heroes in the libertarian movement. When the history of the achievement of liberty is written, Lew will have played a very, very important role in that. He also runs a fantastic website called lewrockwell.com. So, Lew, welcome. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views with us.
Bumper, great to be with you. And you know, I've always admired you, and I'll just mention one thing. From the earliest days of the so-called war on terror, when the vast majority of libertarian organizations joined up with the Bush administration in one sense or another, you wouldn't do it. You continued to stand for peace and against this insane and very evil war that's, of course, cost the lives of millions of innocents subsequently. So you stood by the truth, and it's a great thing to see that.
Yeah, those were lonely days for those of us that were holding that position after 9/11. I mean, I don't think we've ever gotten so much hate mail in all my life, and it was really gratifying to have you there, standing there, and you know, a few other libertarians that it was not easy to take that stand after 9/11, but some of us took it, and I'm glad we did. We certainly have been proven right, don't you think?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And no, I'm sure like you, we got hate mail, and even an important donor to us, wrote and said that he would no longer support the Mises Institute unless we joined with George W. Bush in his magnificent crusade. So, of course, we had to tell him no, sorry, and you know, we hope he'll come back someday. He has never come back. But yeah, there were donors and supporters who were outraged and believed all the propaganda. You know, I guess, you know, maybe you can't blame people who don't know any better, but it's very easy for the government to lie to people and convince them. And I must say, I'm always shocked at the low level of the propaganda that seems to convince people. I mean, they just, it's, you know, it's always if you're against the war, why you must be pro Saddam Hussein, or you're pro Hitler, or you're pro Stalin, or you're pro, you know, whoever is the opposing guy. And of course, the government lives by wars. I mean, especially the military wars and all the contracts that go out to the security state and the surveillance state and all that. But there's something, as you have pointed out, so evil domestically, and that's the drug war. So this goes back a very long time. In fact, in the very early days, Teddy Roosevelt was going around the world trying to convince other countries to sign the first anti-drug treaty. The U.S. has been doing this for a very long time, formally, of course, with the Harrison Act in 1914, barring all the things that had previously been legal, and there were not any problems. Yes, of course, some people use things to an extent they shouldn't have if you had their best interests at heart. But why isn't this up to the individual? And certainly things have been far worse since Prohibition came in, and we eventually learned from the disasters of alcohol prohibition to get rid of that. We've never learned, at least so far, to get rid of drug prohibition, and it's had all the same effects, only much more so. That's why, for example, the U.S. is a prison state. It's a warfare state, it's a welfare state, surveillance state, many other evil things, but it's also a prison state. It's the champion imprisoner of people all over the world, and this is not murderers and rapists and muggers and burglars. These are people who smoked a joint, or maybe they had a small business where they're selling these things. So they're put in jail in horrific circumstances, so many times in the torture regime of solitary confinement. So many commit suicide under those conditions. It's just a horrific thing, and of course, the government and its contractors, as in other areas, make a lot of money out of it. Plus, I always think that people in the government tend to like to do this to people. I mean, they're just the people who rise in the government. Hayek, of course, pointed out why the worst rise to the top. They are the worst people, and they enjoy sending guys to kill other people. They enjoy ordering killing themselves. They enjoy jailing people. They enjoy what Nietzsche called that cold, cruel monster, the state, could get a kick out of making sick people suffer, causing people pain of the most horrific sort, because of course you can't have something that would stop that pain as you're dying, because that might addict you. So that's of course, the official thing. I'll just end this too long answer bumper by mentioning what Mises said in Human Action, if I can paraphrase him. He said, the government has no more business telling you what to put into your body than what to put into your mind. Now, of course, we know the government would like to tell you what to put into your mind, too, and they're constantly propagandizing and lying and trying to fool with our minds. But again, they want to tell us what we can put into our bodies. Even people who are dying in horrible pain, the government should be able to tell them, don't you use that, because that's bad. So I think we have a lot of reasons, however, to be happy about some of the progress that's being made. All the state-based nullification movements, nullifying federal laws. We have medical marijuana and other uses for marijuana legal now in a number of places. I think that movement is really inevitable. It's the most exciting thing in the war against the drug war, I think, to happen from the very beginning. And I think we have every reason to be optimistic that this thing will eventually come to the end, even though there are, of course, very powerful interests against us. Look at the prison industry, and of course the biggest contributor to state-based campaigns to legalize marijuana is the beer industry and the liquor industry. They don't want that competition either. But the interest can be overcome by a change in ideas. So you're helping change ideas, and this is the way we're going to do it. And we should be of good cheer, because there's wonderful things happening in this country in terms of drug legalization.
Yeah, it really is a phenomenal thing. I mean, you'll recall back 30 years ago, I mean, the people that were calling for drug legalization were few and far between.
Yeah.
When Milton Friedman wrote that famous open letter to Bill Bennett, I mean, he got attacked viciously by people in the conservative movement, as you know. And your point about power of ideas is really true, because look at the sea change that has taken place. I mean, everywhere you look, there's respectable mainstream people calling for drug legalization, and here you have really what amounts to a grassroots rebellion at the state level with the legalization of marijuana, where the feds are not even enforcing their own laws in those states.
No, it's quite tremendous. And when we look at a place like Colorado, we also see that it's a real stimulus to the economy, real businesses created, a real market activity created, not the sort of phony Keynesian stimulus, of course, but allowing businesses to operate above ground. There's all kinds of problems. I guess a black market is better than no market, but how shall I say, the people who tend to prosper in a black market as businessmen are not don't apply by don't live by the normal rules otherwise too. There's no reason they have to be like that, but they just tend to be like that. So it's great to have everything above ground, have businesses flourishing all over Colorado. This is going to happen in other states too, is happening in some other states. So it's a whole brand new industry that's been created simply by the government letting people do what they would like to do in this one small but very important area.
Well, the Mises Institute revolves mostly around economic principles. So analyze for me the drug war in terms of economics. The economics of the black market when they make it illegal, and then the economics of a legalized market when they get out of the way?
Well, of course, it's a very important economic question. When something like this is prohibited, it stimulates and, in fact, creates black markets. And again, I remember when one of the very few things I liked about Bill Buckley was that he was a legalization advocate, and I know he would go and smoke pot outside the 12-mile limit in his yacht. And I'll always remember one of his columns where he talked about he found their maid sobbing one day, and her mother was dying of cancer, and none of the potions the doctors were applying were helping her. And so he said, I know where I can get you some heroin. And he got her, and it was great, he wrote about this, and he got her some heroin and with instructions about what to do with it. And it just saved her mother during her final illness from the horrendous pain that she was suffering, and of course all her family were suffering as well. So I think, there are all those kinds of moral issues, but again, prohibition stimulates sort of, I hate to say the worst elements in society, that's the government, but some other unfortunate elements where people seem to feel that unlike regular businesses, they can shoot the opposition if they're coming into what they think of as their territory. So that's, obviously not a good thing. So you have vast resources grabbed by the government. Anytime, we can think of taxation as wealth destruction. So this is vast wealth destruction that takes place in order to fund the drug war, in order to fund what turns out to be vast corruption, which doesn't have a good effect otherwise. I once, many years ago, talked to the district attorney in Rochester, New York, and he said to me, "I hear you're pro-drug legalization." I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I am too," but he said, "It's never going to happen." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "Because everybody's on the payroll." He said, "Every sheriff, everybody on every narcotics squad, everybody in the DEA, and many other agencies, the customs people, they're all being paid off." But again, this is an interest argument. He was exactly right, of course, but these things can be overcome. But the main economic trouble with the drug war is the government spending and diversion of resources, destruction of resources that takes place. Really, we can think of the drug war as making us all poorer. It doesn't make the government poorer, it makes the government richer, and it makes people associated with the government richer. But the rest of us are harmed economically as well as in our freedom and morally and politically, and we can go down a list of various ways in which it hurts us. So when something is legal, we saw this with alcohol too, you don't have the mafia. I don't want to criticize the mafia when I'm talking about the government, since the mafia, of course, is far better than the government. But anyway, you don't have the mafia running alcohol. You don't have no standard. I mean, there are no standards, so that so-called bathtub gin and that sort of thing. It's very difficult for the consumer to know what's reliable and what's not reliable if it's an underground market. We see this in drugs too. Sometimes something is being sold to people that actually kills them. So because of the way it's been mixed up and things have been added to it and so forth. So if we have an open market, a free market, all of a sudden people can know the strength of things, they can know the purity and so forth, and make their own decision. And as Mark Thornton and others have pointed out, when we have something like the alcohol prohibition, all of a sudden all the more moderate forms of alcohol pretty much go out of existence. There was very little illegal wine and beer sold during Prohibition, even though we see all in the early days of Prohibition, there was a lot of beer, and we all have seen the videos that are supposed to be heroic of the ATF guys breaking into beer barrels and spilling the beer on the street and so forth. Terrible destruction of private property. But when you have something like Prohibition, since you can get in just as much trouble and it's just as dangerous to transport, say, a bottle of 200 proof alcohol as it is a bottle of 8 or 10 proof beer, of course, what is the guy going to do? He's going to, under Prohibition, all the less hot, all the less potent forms of alcohol pretty much disappeared, and you only had the most powerful. Same thing has happened with the drug prohibition. This, by the way, is being undone by the legalization in the states. But until that happened, you had all the more moderate, milder forms of marijuana just disappeared because it was in the interest of the guys selling it to, if they're going to take the risk, to sell the most potent, the strongest. Sometimes that's not good for you. Sometimes it's not certainly what the customer would like to have. So now they're all varieties in the marijuana stores in various states. You can get all kinds of strengths. You can get marijuana that's aimed at medicinal. You can get marijuana for recreational purposes. And there's just many, you can get edibles. You can get something you're going to smoke. You can get something that's in effect an electronic cigarette. So choice is good. Choice is good for the economy. It's good for us as individuals. It's good for civilization, as a matter of fact. So to have drug illegalization involves a humongous waste of resources. It involves taking away people out of the economy, away from their families, away from their duties otherwise, and putting them in a government cage and torturing them. So that has very bad economic effects too. Then there's all the money, of course, that's spent on the prisons, on the prison guards, who are, by the way, just in California, by far the most powerful interest group is the prison guard union. So why is that? Because, of course, the prison industry is so huge, so influential, pays off so many people because there's so much money to be made from caging the innocent. And the vast majority of the people they put in cages and torture are innocent. So it's if we want some economic progress that we've already seen in the states where marijuana is partly legal or entirely legal, there's a boom. And it's not a Fed-created boom. It's not a government-created boom. It's the market creating it. So it creates jobs, creates profits, creates new businesses. And it, of course, serves the consumer what the consumer would like to have. So that's the way, as Mises taught us, we always have to look at the economy, not from the standpoint of the businessman, but from the standpoint of the consumer. Does it serve the consumer? And of course, in a free market, the consumer always gets his way because the businessman, no matter how big the business, no matter how rich or powerful the guy, he's forced to serve the consumer. That's the way it ought to be. And this is just another reason why all drugs, not just marijuana, although there's great progress there, should be legal, should be available to anybody who wants them, certainly any adult who wants them.
Well, earlier you were making reference to the war on terrorism and foreign policy, that suggesting that whenever we libertarians oppose these things, they say, oh, well, you must favor the dictator we're trying to oust and so forth, like Saddam Hussein, etc. The same thing happens in the drug war. That if you want to legalize drugs, this was the standard argument, at least many years ago. Well, you want to legalize drugs, then you must favor everybody becoming drug addicts and so forth. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think for one thing, you look at the state of the country before 1914, before the Harrison Act was passed, and was the place was everybody falling down drunk from drugs? Was there a huge amount of crime as a result? Another bad aspect of the drug war, of course, is it stimulates crime because the prices are so high, and the whole thing is at least as the government would call it, a criminal enterprise. And of course, there are some criminal activities within underground drug markets. So I think that's that's a very bad economic situation. All Bumper, I apologize. Tell me, repeat your question again.
Well, you hear it often. People say, "Oh, you favor drug usage. You want everybody to become drug addicts. That's why you want to legalize drugs."
I might just go back to the medicinal drug question. In Britain, it used to be legal for doctors to prescribe heroin to drug addicts, far safer for them than methadone, and they would give them doses that would enable them to function, much like Rush Limbaugh was able to function when he was taking so much OxyContin. So enable them to have jobs, support their families, have a decent life. The U.S. worked very hard to get Britain to outlaw that. But to outlaw, there's of course a legalization and movement in the United Kingdom now again. But one of the most effective, maybe the most effective pain treatment for seriously ill cancer patients was something called the Brompton Cocktail, and it was invented at the Brompton Oratory Hospital, and it consisted of heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. And it was very, very effective where nothing else was effective. Again, the U.S. had that outlawed, and of course outlaws it here, so that well, it's just unbelievably evil and just unbelievably oppressive, unbelievably. I think it shows us the nature of government that they would want to do this to people. And by the way, they know it. They know these effects are happening. And I would say that they actually enjoy it and lick their lips over it.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal thing because, 40, 50 years ago, they could argue that, hey, this is a government program that's important, it's necessary, it's going to help people, and everything's going to turn out fine. We're going to have a drug-free society, and people might not know any better, but now we have 40, 50 years of experience. We know that this has not worked, but it hasn't been neutral. It has caused enormous collateral consequences that are adverse in nature. I mean, your point about the pure drugs is an interesting one. The average person might be shocked by that. Well, wait a minute, why do we care about these drug addicts? Well, we care because they're human beings, and we should empathize with people that are addicted to drugs. And why do we want them? It's my understanding, Lou, that most people that die of so-called drug overdoses aren't dying of overdoses at all, that they're corrupt, bad drugs that they buy from these unsavory drug dealers, which would not exist in a legalized market.
No, it's true, and it might not actually be the actual drug leader; might be the supplier. It's tough to know, but this seems to be in the news in New York a lot. I'm sure it happens in other places as well. When it turns out there's some additive, maybe added malevolently, maybe not, to the heroin that kills people. So yes, I think that's exactly right. It's not the drugs; it's the sometimes it can be health and nutritional issues that derive from the drugs, but a lot of times you're exactly right. It's the drugs have been poisoned, and this is who knows? Maybe the government is doing this. We know for a fact that during Prohibition, the government put out poison alcohol. I mean, they put out alcohol for people to drink that would kill them in order to promote the drug war against alcohol. So these are nasty people, and far worse than I would say than any criminal, including the worst criminals, don't kill the number of people the people in the government do, and don't cause the amount of devastation. And of course, there's the whole taxation, everything evil they do. They really are a terrible bunch, but they're being pushed back. I mean, what's happening in the States is again a great should make all libertarians just joyous to see that this can happen despite all the propaganda, all the cops visiting schools to promote the DARE program, where they talk about all the different kinds of drugs. And I've been told by some kids that it actually just stimulates interest in the drugs. But it's just vast propaganda. But again, it's not working. It's slowly unraveling, and it's just a very great thing. And thanks to all you've done. I mean, you've been a leader in this, and you've done it through ideas. This is the way to change people's minds and hearts, not by coercion, not by violence, and not by lying to them, all the government techniques. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I think it's teetering. I think of all the welfare warfare state programs, this one is clearly on the edge, and that's one of the purposes of this series is to help push it over the edge. I think there's a real shot in the short term here to get rid of this thing. Congress seems to be ignoring what's happening on the ground. We see virtually no talk about it in the presidential race, and yet we can see this sea change that's taking place with respect to at least the legalization of marijuana. The point about your point about prohibition is an interesting one about the the unsavory elements that a black market produces. And I find it fascinating that in the drug war, you've had this endless series of prosecutions and putting gang leaders in jail and busting up Medellin cartels and the Colombia cartel, and they're always replaced by somebody else. While there's really only one way to get rid of these types of gangs, isn't there, Lou?
So of course, that's legalization. But another thing to keep in mind about these prohibitionary activities, the government cannot stop the production and use of any good that people want. Now they can vastly increase the cost of it. They can vastly increase the punishment for people they can catch. They can't stop it. So, as you know, Bumper pointed out, federal prisons all have drugs available in them. I mean, they can't keep it out of their own prisons. And a lot of the federal employees in Washington use these drugs even at work. And I guess with a government employee, you can't really tell if they're on drugs or not. But it's thrilling. It shows the power. How do we say people power of the market. The government cannot actually prohibit anything that people want. So all they can do is make the situation worse. And if drugs are legal, then you can have advertising, you can have information about things, you can have consumer groups evaluate the different products and all the ways that we get information about things we might want to buy. So does that mean that I'm happy with my daughter when she was a teenager? Had she been taking marijuana or even anything more serious? No, of course not. I think only, this is something only for adults. And I think there are probably a number of things that would be useful to adults, but how do we know? It's all research into this is suppressed. It's just like the war on tobacco. There are many things tobacco is actually good for, but for example, it's virtually nobody who smokes gets Alzheimer's disease, just to make one point. And there are a lot of other benefits to tobacco. There are, of course, many negatives to tobacco, too. But again, why shouldn't people be able to choose? And the government, in part because, of course, they make so much money off of it, and also because they don't want to create, who knows why. I was about to make too rational a point. They don't want to create another drug war, but of course they'd love to create another drug war. They just don't feel they could get away with it and it would harm their other activities. So it's again, they can't stop anything that people want on the market. All they can do is drive it underground, promote the more criminal suppliers and deliverers of the material. Also have, who in the market, you don't ever have competitors going and shooting up the competitive pizza parlor. I mean, it doesn't happen. There have to be. So if pizza were illegal, then you would have. I'm sure the guys who would be baking the pizza and delivering it would be armed, and they would be armed not for self-defense, which is of course a great thing, but to take out the competition. So if we don't want that kind of conduct in society, and I'm sure nobody watching this wants that kind of conduct, then we want free and open markets in everything. There shouldn't be any government prohibition of anything, whether it's goods from overseas or drugs or alcohol or tobacco, and even things like some of the drugs that are demonized also sometimes turn out to have something good about them. I know that thalidomide, which this was a pharmaceutical drug, not an underground drug, which of course caused such horrific birth defects back in the 1960s and led to much more power for the FDA to not exactly to the benefit of society, was in more recent years discovered to have benefits for certain kinds of cancer. So you can't let the government make the decisions. This is a very stupid institution. I always think of it as like a huge, a bloodthirsty dog, blind and stupid, however. So it can roam around, can do a lot of damage, step on you, bite you, and so forth, but it doesn't produce good. And we just look at every single thing it does. It's a disaster. Its courts are disasters. Prosecutors run we can go through the list of every single government program. But the drug war I guess there's really no way of tallying how many millions of people have been dramatically harmed by this, how many families have been destroyed, how many lives wrecked and lives taken, how much economic activity has been suppressed, how much poorer we are as a society in just pure economic terms, as well as, of course, other terms, by the existence of this drug war. But again, thanks to people like you, we're making progress.
Well, we are, and your point about how an open society where drugs are legalized would be so much more humane is so good. I mean, you'd be treating people with empathy, that if somebody's got a drug problem, people would be willing to help out if he wants help. Everything would be out on the table. People could seek help if they wanted to. They could consume what they wanted to. So, and here in the last minutes of this interview, give us the freedom case from a libertarian perspective on, even we've talked about all the bad consequences of the war, but what about just the case for why people should be free to do this without government interference, Lew?
Well, I think because you own yourself. And because you own yourself, you're not owned by anybody else. You're not owned by the collective. You're not owned by the DEA or the narc squad or the government or any other entity. You own yourself. And that's the basis of all private property and civilization. You own yourself. So to any extent that that right is being trespassed on, as it is by the drug war, it's a dramatic diminution of freedom, of prosperity, of civilization, of just humaneness in society. And if we had, for example, drugs were legal, you would have charitable organizations, just as you do with alcohol, that would help people who feel they're having a problem and would like to do something about it. So you would have nonprofits, and you would have for-profits, and would be taken care of. But it would be whatever the problems that would result from letting people make their own choices. And isn't that the basis of libertarianism? Would be far less than this horrific nightstick state, the guns they've got aimed at your head, putting people in cages, torturing them, destroying their lives, because they're doing what they want to do and not hurting anybody else. So that's, that you own yourself, that you are your own property, and you should be able to do what you want, as long as you don't affect anybody else's rights, of course. You can't kill somebody, you can't rape them, you can't burglarize their house, and so forth. But if you're not hurting anybody else, if you want to smoke a marijuana cigarette, or you want to take something else on your own property, that's exactly your own business. So you might have restaurants, for example, that say we don't want that in here, just like restaurants don't want you bringing alcohol in and drinking it. That would be for competitive reasons as well. But you might have a teetotaler restaurant that wouldn't want. That's up to them to decide. And you would have, of course, teetotaler organizations in terms of drugs, people who would advocate for religious reasons or whatever, don't use these things. And certainly there's, I would agree there's something wrong with getting drunk, because you might lose sort of control over your faculties and do things you really didn't mean to do and shouldn't do. But again, whose business is that? It's not the government's, it's not a coercive gang of thugs that might roam your neighborhood thinking they're going to shape you up for whatever standards they would like you to adhere to. It's just the fact of self-ownership, that we have the right to do with ourselves, as long as we don't affect anybody else's rights, to do what we want with ourselves. And maybe we're going to do things with ourselves other people don't like. Our beliefs are offensive to a lot of millennials. Not all millennials, thank goodness, but a lot. To all the snowflakes on campus and so forth. They're outraged by our beliefs in a free market and libertarianism in general. They don't have the right to stop us, and the fact that they're offended is not our problem. So the same with drugs, the same with alcohol, same with tobacco, whatever other new things might be discovered. We have a right to make use of them on our own property. We don't have the right to do it on somebody else's property, of course. We have the right to engage in commerce. We have the right to buy and sell. And that's where civilization comes from. That's where human flourishing comes from. So the drug war has been a huge knock on human flourishing. I mean, it's drastically diminished the human flourishing, not only in our own society, but all over the world, thanks to the evil Teddy Roosevelt and other people who promote, as part of the U.S. empire, of course, outlawing drugs and creating all these so-called cartels. And not, of course, actually cartels, but these drug businesses in Mexico or other places. And except for their enforcement methods, they're they probably are okay. I'm not a student of that, but there's nothing wrong with, say, buying and selling marijuana. There is something wrong with hurting your competitors, of course. So if we're concerned, we always have to watch the utopia argument. There's no perfection on earth. We'll never have everything perfect. So how do we diminish the imperfections? Well, one way we can diminish the imperfections is end the drug war. We would hugely diminish the imperfections in American society, getting rid of most of the prison industry. I'd like to get rid of the whole prison industry myself, but at least that part of it. Getting rid of the DEA, the narc squads, all the federal agencies involved in making trouble through the drug war. We'd all be so much better off. We'd have our freedom. We could make our own decisions. If we made a bad decision, I hate to alarm anybody. A lot of times humans make bad decisions, but that's not up to J. Edgar Hoover to do anything about it. So it's or as Judge Napolitano calls him, J. Edgar Comey either. So we have to go for what is the best. That's our choice, better or worse. Perfection and total evil are not our choices, although it seems like there's plenty of total evil on earth. But anyway, we don't have a choice for perfection. We can dramatically make society better, dramatically free people, dramatically shape up the economy, which of course the Fed and the federal government are doing so much to damage, by ending the drug war. So I hope people read about it. I hope they educate themselves and understand the arguments about why this is a terrible thing. It's a criminal operation. The real criminals are in the government. And if we want to decrease the amount of criminality in society, both among the people who supply the drugs and among the people who are suppressing the drugs, we have to end the drug war.
Lew, thank you for that absolutely excellent exposition as to why we need to end this evil, immoral, and horrifically destructive government program. And thank you for the great work you've done for liberty with the Mises Institute, LewRockwell.com, and you personally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bumper.